Hi everyone! I was listening to one of the videos on Telltale's Fireside Chat where he was talking more about Mike Lindell and accusations of voter fraud in the second election that had involved, at that time, President Trump. Now, of course, this is something we don't really talk about on my channel as far as politics and voter fraud and that sort of thing, but the reason I wanted to bring this up was because this part is relevant to some things that we bring up on my channel, which has to do with the military. So the person that you're looking at here on the screen is Thomas McInerney, who is a retired lieutenant general. He did serve in the Army, but I believe he retired out of the U.S. Air Force. For those of you guys that don't know, I served in the United States Marine Corps, and I did work briefly in intelligence. This was nothing super crazy and super high up intelligence, nothing like finding out what the NSA really does and all that, but I definitely know the basic protocol, the rules and regulations that we have to follow. So what Thomas McInerney is doing, unfortunately, is he's abusing, I would say, the ideas that civilians have about military personnel, especially higher ranking military personnel. There's a lot of things that civilians get wrong about the military, and they think they know it because of stuff in movies. So for example, a really big one is this concept of collateral damage, where if you bomb a hospital, for example, that's just part of collateral damage, that's just part of war, and it's not. It's considered mission failure. And if you do that, you are in a lot of trouble. So this idea that, it's just collateral damage, the military doesn't really care, you get in a lot of trouble for this. You could get kicked out for it. So it's a big deal. The other misinformation or misunderstanding that the average person has about the military is that the high-ranking military officials have all kinds of access to stuff, and they just don't. So if we look at what he did in the military, we can see that he was a commander, which is, commanding officer makes sense. His rank is definitely high enough. And we're looking at stuff like a fighter wing. We're looking at air division. We're looking at air command. If we scroll down and read more about him on his Wikipedia page, we see stuff about him being a pilot, for example. Cool. Because he was a commanding officer, there's a really good chance that he had a top secret security clearance that's really standard. So what? That's kind of so what. The second portion, or the second component of accessing secret information is part one, you need your security clearance. And then part two, you have a need to know. Just because you have a top secret security clearance doesn't mean you have access to all the top secret documents, for example. That's just not how it works. So even for us with our low level intelligence, we had this vault. Every S2, that's where the intelligence is S2. Every S2 has a vault, at least it does in the Marines, and on the front of it, there's this, it's just like a paper that we print out. I forget how often we printed it out, maybe once every week, once every month, something like that, where it gave an updated list of who currently has access to the vault. And I think the maximum number of names was 5 or 6. That's it. It wasn't like a big amount of people. And compare that to how many people were in our battalion. There was between, I would say, 800, 950 between that. It just depends on, who's rotating in and out and that sort of thing. So this is not a long list of people. And I gotta say, even the commandant of the Marine Corps, even the president of the United States was not on that list. So if either of those people came in and asked for access to our little vault, couldn't let him in. It's a big deal. You can't just let people in. So this need to know, that's I would say, the bigger component, because getting a security clearance, it's kind of a standard thing. And at one point there was a real big push for certain MOSs, certain military occupational specialties, like a job. There were certain MOSs that really needed to get between, like, at least secret, but they preferred a top secret. It had to do with IEDs that were being checked out in Iraq, and it's this whole thing. If you guys are interested, just ask. But that's pretty standard. It's pretty easy to get. The need to know, that's the hard one to get. Okay. And I don't see where this guy had a need to know about cybersecurity. I just don't. When we look at when he got out in 1994. You know, the internet existed then, especially in the military. After all, it was created for the military. But things have definitely changed. And I don't see anywhere that he worked in any type of communications, let alone cybersecurity, intelligence, where he would understand what kind of access that we have to different types of computers, for example. And things have changed. 1994, of course, is like ancient history in tech terms. So I don't see why he's being considered any kind of expert for this. All that being said, let's assume for a second that he maintained his security clearance after he retired and somehow still has a need to know. So let's assume all of those things. What are some of the things that he's saying? Said something that COVID-19 was a biological attack on the world, a direct attack on the election. Okay. Another thing that he said is that there was Russian interference, and this is a little bit different. There was cyber warfare he's talking about, and so on. Now let me tell you, when I heard him say this stuff, immediately I just thought, this guy knows nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Immediately. As soon as those words come out of his mouth, I said, well, he doesn't know that. He just doesn't. The reason for this is because there's two types of things that I can speak about having worked in intelligence. One is something very general, like we have a vault and there's names on it. There's documents in the vault, stuff like that. The second type of thing that I can talk about are things that I've learned that have since become public knowledge. One example of this was when North Korea back in 2006 or 2007, 2008, don't remember exactly, but around those times, North Korea had gotten access of plutonium and uranium, and people were really worried that they were going to launch a nuclear attack on the United States, but the military didn't do anything about it. And eventually it was found out that they didn't have enough of it to really do anything other than a little bit of testing, the end. Now, that coming out to the public was really drawn out. It was like this weeks-long fear fest. That's how I had characterized it. And I was really disappointed in that because it caused a lot of fear for people. And it was so unnecessary. And I remember being on forums, I remember talking with my family, and they were talking about stuff like, why are we still in Iraq? There's no weapons of mass destruction. If there are, we can't find them. But we can see that North Korea is definitely ready to attack. They have nuclear capabilities. How come we're not attacking them? And for me, all I could say was, I can't tell you why, but we're not worried about it. Don't worry about it. And some people took me at my word, but a lot of people said stuff like, you're brainwashed by the military. This is mostly just phrases around brainwashing by the military. Eventually it did come out that they didn't have enough to test or to really make an impact. It was just a little bit of testing, the end. For us, this was like a little sentence, but the media had turned it into this really, I thought it was pretty disgusting how they drew it out. Anyway, that's something I can talk about because it's public. There's a lot of stuff I've never spoken about, ever. Never written about it, never spoken about it. There's eyes and ears everywhere, and you guys know that if you guys remember the Patriot Act in the United States right after 9/11. I've never told anybody. I've never told my family. I've never told my closest friends. I've never told my cats. I've never said anything about it to anyone because it's treason. It is a serious, serious crime. It's such a serious crime. So when we have a retired lieutenant general who's talking about, oh yeah, I was accessing these security documents where I found out that Russia and China had done X, Y, and Z, and also that COVID-19 was a manufactured biological attack, blah, blah, blah. Treason. The fact that we could even hear him talking about this, and he's not in prison, like a federal prison, and he hasn't been, and all of this information hasn't been scrubbed from the internet, the fact that we even can read about it right now, this tells you he was just making it up immediately. Hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of an idea of why we got to be careful about authorities. He seems like an authority, but is he, right? And so hopefully this has shown you that he is not an authority on these topics, and is just, like I said, I think he's just using his uniform for automatic authority. People just believe him because he's got his uniform on. Hopefully he stops making these claims. Hopefully he stops abusing his position, but I mean, one can hope. If you guys have any questions, I can't guarantee that I can answer all of them, but I can at least tell you I can't answer that for you. But if you guys have questions, feel free to post them in the comment section below. You guys can check out my links to Patreon, Discord, etc. in the pinned comment below. But as always, guys, thanks for listening.